Today we have a special guest, Rob Velez. He's a commercial real estate expert in the market, and we're gonna have the audience ask a bunch of questions, and I'm gonna start it off and ask him a few questions. So Rob, welcome, my friend. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Rob, so I'm gonna get right into it. So can you give us a brief overview of your journey in commercial real estate?
Sure. So I was a junior in college right here at ESU. I've been in Stroudsburg since fifth grade. And a broker, Daniel Parrish, she was looking for someone who didn't know anything. So I interviewed with him, and for some reason, he gave me a job because I knew nothing about commercial real estate or real estate, period. And took me under his wing. I started up. I was sitting in class junior year of business school, and I sold Steve's Pizza across the street for $500,000. I was like, this is where I gotta be. So then I caught the bug, and I've been at it ever since. I was an everything broker for a very long time, as most people are in the small local markets like this, and then I niched down into the apartment space 3 years ago, and now all I focus on is large multifamily.
Great. What he's not telling you is, I remember him just graduating, and he comes to my office. I called his boss, Dan. Remember that? I called his boss, Dan, because I have some offices that I sublease in the back. And I said, Dan, I want to rent these offices. And here comes Dan with this kid. This kid is scared. He's sitting at my desk, on the other side of my desk. He's all scared. You remember that? Yeah. And he lifted I think I was your first customer. Wasn't I your very first customer I was? And you leased those offices for me. He leased a couple of office suites for me. So we're going to go right to my next set of questions is, how can an investor navigate potential risk in the current market? The market is funky right now. So we got interest rates going up. We have buyers thinking that their properties are still, sellers thinking that their properties are still worth what they were worth in 2022 and 2021. So how can a new investor or an investor navigate potential risk in this market?
Yeah, I think you have to focus on the debt, because the debt is a big part of the problem today. A lot of people who have debt that is maturing, people took short-term debt. A lot of flippers here, that's not fixed. So you got to really be careful with your debt today. Expenses are going up. Be careful with the insurance, the cost of turnovers, and obviously price. You got to always, what we thought was a good deal before, assume prices have come down 20%, so go down even more. So then you're buying correctly to protect yourself from a potential another 20% decline. You'll be okay.
So Rob, you and I were talking not too long ago, and I saw a CoStar report, and in the CoStar report there was the report said that multifamily in 2023, guys, transactions were down by 56%. Let that sink in for a minute, right? Multifamily transactions were down 56% last year. Rob, what do you attribute that to? And are you seeing that here in our local markets in the Lehigh Valley and in the Monroe County and in the Poconos market?
Yeah, so it was down probably more than that, 65% in transactions. Affected mostly in the Sun Belt market. That's what's mostly getting affected. But it was the debt. The debt was the biggest problem. We went from 4% to 8% in 6-8 months, and people were not prepared for that. So definitely the debt.
What are you seeing sellers are doing to navigate those, and where do you see the potential opportunities for people in the room here, right? And for investors maybe listening to us that want to get into the game?
Potential opportunity. I'm going to keep going back to the debt. So you find somebody that has a maturity date coming up, let's say a new construction. Any new construction you find today, that contractor, that builder, the developer got that loan 2 years ago at about 4%, and now they have to refi or to keep it, or they have to sell because they're going back to the bank at 7.5%, 8%, and they're working on tight margins. So they weren't prepared for that. Doesn't fit the bank's DSCR, so the debt is huge right now. That's what I'm going after. People who have maturity dates today. In commercial real estate, it's typically 5-year notes, fixed for 5 years. So anyone who bought 5 years ago is probably coming up with that today. So the debt is definitely a big opportunity today.
I think you touch on something really powerful, guys, and he he really just hit on something really, really powerful. If you guys want to get into, if you want to buy apartments or commercial, we're talking commercial stuff, that's 5 units and bigger or mixed use, he just shared some real gold and gems. They're 5 years, right? So I just refied a 5-unit 2 days ago that I bought in my fire property. You guys seen that one on social media, right? The one that was burned down. So I just refinanced that property 2 days ago. So that's only fixed for 5 years, guys, and it balloons in 10. If you buy a list, let's say today, of investors that bought properties 5 years ago that are units are between 5 and let's say 20, right? And they got financing 5 years ago, you know their term is coming due. 5 years ago, they had a rate of 5%, 4%. I mean, it wasn't 2% yet. 5 years ago, it was a little higher, but 4.5%, 5%, right? Now, I just refied a 5-unit at 7.75. I refied another property in January at 8.5 at the SCR, single family. I only have 2 single families in my portfolio outside of my primary residence, and 8.5. Guys, I got a lot of experience. I got an impressive track record for the banks, right? And they gave me an 8.5% interest rate back in December. So back in January, but January the markets were really, really scared. Nick, you actually did that loan for me, as a matter of fact. My lender's in the room here, right? So just again, major gold that he shared there. So I want to open up the room. I'm going to ask him one more question, but I want to open up the room to for the audience to ask questions. You guys good with that? All right. So Rob, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see new investors make, and how can they be avoided?
They're looking at the seller's numbers, the realtor's numbers, and they think that's gold, but they're taking that at face value. And you really can't take what the sellers or the realtor says at face value. They're not on your side. Even if a bank approves a deal, doesn't mean that it is a great deal. So you really have to know your stuff, know your exit, know that you have cash flow enough. I wouldn't follow the herd. Everyone's about the 1% rule, or you have to hit that 1.25 DSCR. We're here for big cash flows. So then if something happens, we are protected.
What was the last deal that we had on the contract with you that we actually backed out of the deal because the numbers? Which one was that?
Charlesburg cabins, cottages. Yeah,
at the cottages, we literally experienced this on the deal that I had on the contract. Well, how many cottages were there? 25,
20 units or so.
20 units up in Tannersville, and then we got in the numbers, and the numbers just weren't there, and we were like, now we got to get out. And the seller was just on some other, he thought that his property was worth significantly more than we can make it work. So what advice are you getting? So we have how many people are new in the room? Raise your hands. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So about 5, 6 people are new in the room, right? That don't have any experience. Rob, what advice would you tell them to learn how to run the numbers? First of all, how many people in the room want rentals? Want to build a rental portfolio? I'm gonna say 90% of the room. So what advice are you giving them? Because this is not something they teach you in school.
Right.
This is not something you learn in school. As a matter of fact, the realtors in the room, can you show me your residential realtors in the room? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 residential realtors. Okay, put your hands out. How many of you know in the room, not to put you on the spot, but I just want to prove a point. Residential guys, how many of you were taught in your brokerage on the residential side what cap rates are and how to figure out what a trading cap rate is? 0 people raise their hand, right? So this is something that you need to learn from someone that's doing it, and that's the language of money. When I started this meetup, I said, this is a money game. You need to learn the language of money. So you're out there, they're teaching you to sling. I used to sell insurance, so I'm thinking policies, life insurance policies. They're teaching you to sling houses, but they're not teaching you the language of money, how to work with guys like us. You need to learn this language. So what advice are you giving to the realtors in the room and to the new guys in the room? How do they get that information? How do they get trained up, coached up to get that info?
Yeah, if you want to excel and excel quick, you have to find a mentor. That's probably the best way to do it. But you have YouTube, and everyone is running a cap rate formula on YouTube. So you find someone who's reputable, someone who has the experience, the units, not just anybody. And then it's just practice. You have to have your at-bats. You have to underwrite deals every single day. You have to be an expert in, where you're trying to go to. And for the realtors, I would say get into a firm or a brokerage or a group that's investing. It's all right if they're doing a little bit of residential. Ideally, they're all commercial, but if that's where you want to go, surround yourself with it.
Yeah, this is really good. I just want to see by show of hands, how many people in the room have a coach? I'm the only one. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of us have a coach. 7 of us have a coach, right, out of like 20, right? You if you want to excel and you want to go fast, you got to have mentorship. You got to have a coach. I got to tell you, that is the best money I spent. And there's people in this room right now that I personally coach that I know have made multiple 6 figures already from what I taught them. Yes or yes, guys? Those of you that right? Yes, right? So it's important to have a mentor. It's important to have a coach. It's important to have someone helping you, teaching you the language of money. And I don't want to get into a tangent about this, but it's so important because when you have a coach or you have a mentor, let's say Rob's your mentor, you go into Rob and you're going to be, hey, man, does this deal make sense? And Rob's going to tell you, did you look at this? Did you look at that? 20% expense ratio? Are they stupid? Like you know what I mean? What is this broker talking about? 20%. A well-ran multifamily in the country, well-ran, the average numbers is 50%. So it's a red flag, but you only get that when you have the right mentorship, the right coaching, right? Make sense? Or you're surrounded with the right people. You're in rooms like this getting the information. You are who you spend time with, and you are who you listen to. Period in the story. That's it. Rob and I are here talking about, and you're a fly on the wall, and we're talking about multi-million-dollar deals, and you're making $50,000, $60,000 a year, and me and Rob are talking about, hey, I'm going to flip this property. Hey, I'm about to. I didn't pay taxes this year, which I didn't, by the way. Publicly, legally, I did a cost sag. Yes, that's how it went, man. I freaking paid $100,000 the year before that. This year, I didn't pay any taxes because I did a cost sag, right? Because of the people I was surrounding myself with. Like I was like, hey, I had a lot of pain the year before. I paid a lot of money in taxes. And I was talking to my circle, to my master, and I was like, dude, I paid freaking, and they were like, yo, why didn't you do a cost sag? And I was like, I don't know, but guess what? I'm doing it now. Right? I did it. We got my taxes today, 0 liability. Amazing. Right? Amazing. That's a freaking win. And that's legally. Right, guys? That's legally. But that's only because of the people I surround myself with. The conversations I'm having, people I'm having with. And sometimes you pay for that access. You got to pay to play. You got to pay to get that information, but it's that one idea. That one idea, guys, right? That one idea you get that makes $1 million. So, Rob, my final question, I'm going to open it up to the audience. What are the pros and cons of different property types, retail, office, industrial, for investors with varying risk tolerance?
So we'll run through each sector a little bit. Office is very difficult. It's always been difficult, especially in our market. And now after the pandemic, it's even more. It's just very hard to lease. So if you were to buy an office building, that vacancy could sit vacant for 4 to 6 months. You just have no idea with office. And then industrial, if you take all the this is what I heard from a reputable source. I don't know where it come from, but take all the huge cities around us, Boston, it should be fine. Because it leases up very, very quickly. We have still a strong demand. In the Sunbelt markets, there's a lot of new construction, like in Texas and all those markets. So rents are going down. But in our markets where there's not tons of construction, our rents are going to be okay.
So just for the record, the Northeast, where we are, by the way, guys, is the only place in the country that's still strong. Real estate in the market is still strong. The only place in the country where we're seeing rent is still growing, Boston, Massachusetts, all of the Northeast, right? We're still seeing rent still growing, although my property manager's here, and I'm not necessarily seeing that, but that's what the data is saying, right? That the Northeast is still strong. Actually, Mello, you sent me an article. Yeah, you sent me a CoStar report just a few days ago. But yes, so the Northeast, so we're in a good spot, guys. But also, I want you all to know that being in the Northeast, the meltdowns usually happen from the West Coast, and then they come this way, but they happen over there first, right? And California has been, and we have a lot of California listeners, so big up to you guys, love you guys. But you guys know it is what it is, right? They're getting hurt right now over there in California. It's weird because I talk to a lot of people in California, and they're like, oh, we're still getting multiple offers and all of this craziness. And then I talk to other people and they're like, no, we're not. Like, we're not getting that. So it's market dependent, area dependent. So, but we're in a strong, so far, so good. We're still strong. But again, I will rely, I'm going to defer back to you guys, the realtors, because you guys are boots on the ground. I'm just an investor, right? I'm just a guy that's looking at the data and making decisions. But you guys that are selling out there are out there talking to people every day and know what's really happening. My property manager back there is the one boots on the ground talking to people. He knows what's happening. I'm just a guy putting the deals together. Right, so I want to take questions. So do we have any questions? I want you guys to come up with some questions, please. Josh, come up, Josh. And Josh is coming up, and he's going to ask his question. Go ahead, Josh.
Cool. So I basically wanted to ask, I'm sure everyone in the room wants to know, the cost seg situation with the no taxes. Could you explain a little more on that?
So that question's for me. All right, thank you, Josh. Cost segregation is a study that's done to accelerate depreciation on assets. So I literally met with my accountant today. I told you guys a few minutes ago I went to get my taxes today, my paperwork today. And so I own a 57-unit apartment building. So what we did is we hire a firm, they go out, and then they itemize every item, and then we take accelerated depreciation on every item. So in that particular asset, we had, I'm going to say I'm going to say like $480,000, something like that. I know I'm a GP, I'm a general partner in that deal, right? I have a partner. I own 35% of the shares of the 35% equity is mine, and my business partner owns 35, and then the rest is investors like you guys. So it could just be I opened it up for subscription. So 35% of those credits are mine. So what happens is, full disclosure, I'm not a CPA, right? I just have smart people around me talking to me and advising me. So I don't know, he called it credits or whatever he calls it. I was telling him, I was in his office and I was like, do I have any left over, right? Because I'm not paying. Okay, do I have left over for next year? Because I need to think about the next cost seg I need to do, right? Because I don't want to pay next year. And he was like, it's not credits. He called it something else, right? CPA language. I don't care. But it's a certain amount of credits. I'm going to call it credits you get. And now you write that off against your tax liability. So let's say you earned, yes, and it carries over. So you have a tax liability of $100,000 and I have $400,000 in cost seg credits. I now apply 100, boom, brings my liability to zero. Woo, beautiful thing. That is a freaking beautiful thing, right? So you have a W-2 job and you're a high income earner and you're paying a lot of money. You start investing in assets like mine or groups like mine. And when we do a cost seg study, you get your share and boom, it brings down you got that, Mandy, because you're an investor in that deal, right? You get that depreciation, you get to write it off on your taxes. I hope that answers your question, Josh. Anyone else? So bring up some questions, please. Jeremy, come up.
Okay, so my commercial question is, how do you price out the square footage on commercial units when you have mixed commercial and residential? So if you have a 6-unit residential, 3-unit commercial, how would you price out those 3-unit commercial places? It's kind of hard to figure out.
For sure, great question. So the commercial spaces, you would just do it separately. If it's, because they're kind of based off the cap rate, a lot is on the income. So if you were to have an AT&T and a barber shop, you're not going to value each at the same cap rate. So you really have to do each one separately.
Empty. How do you market to get somebody in there? How would you price out for lease?
Comps. Based off of comps. So you're going to start off with the comps. So you see who in the area has retail space and what they're leasing at. And it's probably around $12 a foot, 1,000 square feet, 1,000 a month, give or take, if you're in our market. But go off of the comps. If you're going after, you have a great space, Class A space, and you can go after a national tenant, you may put no price there. And then when they call, you jack them up to $18 a foot. But it's really just off comps.
Perfect. We got one more question here. Anyone else got questions? Just come up. Just line up so we can knock them out. Okay.
I have a few.
Hi, this is Natasha. Natasha's got a few questions.
My question is, first, because if I'm not mistaken, you don't need a separate license to do commercial, correct? So how do you get into the commercial space?
You just have to surround yourself in the commercial world, you just have to stop selling residential. You're no longer the residential broker. All you do is commercial real estate, and you just have to take on that identity, and all you focus on, all you prospect for when your buyers call you, find me a house. I'm sorry, I don't do that anymore. You just gotta burn all bridges and go for it.
By the way, he just did that to me. I called him, 2 weeks ago? And I was like, Rob, I got this vacancies, man. Remember those little offices when you started with me?
8 years later, he's still trying to get.
I like, yo, dude, I got a couple I need to rent. He was like, sorry, man, I don't do that. Doesn't align with my goals. So I just commended him and I complimented him because he was able to say no to me because it doesn't align with his goals. It doesn't align with where he's going. So big ups to you, bro, for that.
And have you ever done residential so that you can compare the two, or you just came right out the box and did commercial?
Right out the box in commercial. When I went to my interview, I didn't know I was going to a commercial firm, so I just got lucky. I didn't know residential, commercial.
He got very lucky.
I've never sold a whole house in my life and just got lucky.
Because when he came in into the commercial world, I wanted my daughter. A couple years later, I was getting my daughter license, and I called Dan, and I know his boss. Like, I've done business with his boss years ago. And he told me, no, he won't take my daughter until, and that's my kid. Like, I was teaching. I was like, yo, dude, like, I'm going to teach her. Like, you guys, like, I'm going to teach her. He said, nah, he won't take anyone that's new, that doesn't know that's not already in the market experience and know the market.
And then one last question on this line. What is the cap rate?
What is a cap rate? A cap rate is pretty much how they evaluate your return on investment. So it is your income. Very simple formula for cap rate. Income minus expenses divided by your purchase price. Income minus expenses equals NOI. You take your NOI divided by your purchase price. That is your cap rate percentage.
Next question. Thank you, Natasha. Let's give her a hand, by the way, for that. Great questions. Great question. Lewis is coming up.
All right. So I have a question about how do you prevent yourself from what's happening to these investors now, like you said, where they've got these properties 5 years ago. Now the interest rates are changing and their numbers don't work for them.
Man, sometimes it's just bad luck. I mean, some people got loans 10 years ago and it's maturing now. You got a loan in 2014. You did everything right. You just happen to come up against a bad debt cycle. It's just really not much you can do there. Now,
I'll tell you what you could do. Please, let me give you some strategies, right? So when you underwriting your deals, you always underwrite with multiple exits. If you buy right, you'll never go wrong. You always make your money when you buy. And if you buy a property, make sure you stress test the shit out of it. And those of you that have been my students know that I teach you guys that. Stress test, what's your exit? What other exit do you have? If this doesn't work, will it cash flow? If that doesn't work, will this work, right? So as long as you buy right, if you buy right, I'm a bigger believer that if you buy a property right and you finance it right, you have options. I just refinanced a property at 75% loan to value right now. But let me give you an example of what I mean by that, right? You got to be a student of this game. I had an option. I had a buyer for that property. Could have sold that, but I actually had it on the contract. Could have sold that property. I decided not to sell that property, Louis. And the reason I decided not to sell that property was because when I look at the overall overarching picture of the market, I'm going to get into some other stuff, a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more high level, but please, guys, stay with me. We have 1.8 million immigrants that came into our country over the last 18 months, 2 years. Yes? We all know that. We all see it on the news, right? That's that we know of that have to go back to court, that we know of. So we'll just go 2 million, but we know it's significantly more than that. We had a crisis, right? A shortage of housing of 3.5 to 4 million prior to that. Yes? Okay, when I do the math, that's 6 million. But I'm going to be conservative, right? There's overdevelopment right now, and the Sunbelts have millions of units. I think they have 2 million units coming online right now. They're going to get absorbed, right? They're going to get absorbed really quick. But we have this migration issue. Here's what else is happening, is that new developers, the developments that you're seeing happening coming up right now, are people, I think one of you mentioned, I think you mentioned it, Rob, are developers that got these loans 2 years ago when the interest rates were in the fours. Those numbers don't pencil anymore. Right now, permits for new developments are down. So development have slowed down. So what does that mean when you think about that and you seriously think and you analyze that? That means in a couple of years, rents are going to go up. Now, I know it's not sustainable, guys, but it's just logic. Because demand is going to go up, because where are we putting these people that just came into our country? Where are we putting them? Where are we putting them? We got to put them somewhere. So the government is going to have to throw money at the problem they created. Entrepreneurs bring value to the marketplace, and we solve problems. So when I was looking at this thing holistically, my decision was I'm going to keep this property because I'm betting that in 3 to 5 years it's going to be worth even more because I'm anticipating demand. See that? So I'm studying the marketplace. So to answer your question, as long as you buy right and you're studying the data, I shared stats with you guys. There's a reason why I shared the stats with you guys. And you're studying the data, you can make better informed decisions. Does that make sense? Right? So it's all in how you buy, and that's how I manage my risk. That's how I sleep at night. Hey, when my students come to me like, hey, this deal, what do I tell you guys? What do the numbers say? I don't care how you feel about the property. What does the data say? And then we make the decision based on the data. Is there another part to your question, Norris? Thank you. Let's give him a hand. We have Javon.
How you doing? I'm Javon, everybody. Nice to meet you. Hey, Javon. Okay, my first question is an investor question. In your experience, what are the most important qualities or skills that a successful real estate investor should possess?
Yeah. Is there more to that, or is that?
Oh, no, it's it.
Deals. You got to know how to find deals. Most important thing. If you find a deal, you can find the money, you can find the partner, you find the lender, you find everything. You find a good deal.
Okay, and I have one more question. That's it. What do you see as the most promising opportunities or trends in the Pocono real estate market right now? And yes, I know it's a vague question, but Martin?
So I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. So I met with the mayor of the city of Scranton. I'm actually meeting with the state senator. I had him on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, Marty Flynn. We're actually meeting tomorrow for lunch. And we know already for sure that we have the Amtrak train. By the way, how many of you came to the Poconos from New York or wherever because of this train? I was one of them, the train, right? 20 years ago. I moved to Poconos, the train, right? It's finally coming. So they got the funding, and the train is stopping in North Cortland here in East Stroudsburg. Then it's going to Toby Hanna, and then it's going to Scranton. That's the last stop. So when you ask about opportunity, and I'm going to put it out here, so all my listeners and all of you that are here, thank you for coming here. Here it is. Buy near the train. Here it is. Buy near the train. Here's what I could tell you. Another insight. You want me to give you another inside tip? Yes? You guys want it? Yeah? So I was told by very credible sources that by 2028, the train will be functioning and running up and down the Northeast from New York into Scranton and making all those stops. So your biggest opportunity, I would be looking around those areas, buying and holding around those areas. So Scranton, where in Scranton? So it's by the mall. So by the Steamtown Mall downtown is Jeremy is from Scranton. So we're doing some deals right now in that Scranton market. Jeremy is going to be doing some deals in that Scranton. So we're anticipating. So the market's not there yet, but we're looking down the road of what's coming. Anticipation is power, guys. Right? The only way you can anticipate is if you're studying. Make sense?
Okay. And my last question is, I know you said earlier you were doing that conversation with Starbucks. I was wondering about in that area of Marshall's Creek, I see the Smithfield Gateway, and I'm guessing there's something else coming. What is necessarily that? Is there just funding coming in for those type of, projects?
Is there? Yeah, so they get a lot of state funding to do the road and all those things, especially with huge projects like that. State and government funding, but they get a lot of investors as well. Like they're looking for the ROIs. Yeah. So it's a developer, and you could Google the map, and they'll have they're looking to do storage, apartments, a hotel, and then that retail as well.
Thank you. Let's give Javon a hand. We got Slade coming on up.
So this is for a question for the commercial real estate agent. It's a two-part question. I know beginning residential real estate agents still have trouble, with lead generation or listing generation. How does a commercial agent start with that?
He's a beast at that, by the way.
It's just finding deals, like I said.
Tell them how you really do it.
You got to be you got to be really good at finding deals, and you got to be an inspector. I don't know what they call it, but you have to be really good at finding deals and finding people. And you find an LLC trying to find the person. It's just a numbers game. That's it. And the same thing with residential. It's just a numbers game. You got to really be out there every day and looking for deals.
And then when you do find those leads, say they're an investor, how do you provide value to that investor?
That's a great question.
The seller lead?
Yeah.
How do I provide value?
I break return transactions from them.
I think the best way of me providing value is that everyone that's calling them is asking for a listing. And when I call them up, I'm just like, give me a rent roll. I have Martin here and we'll make you an offer in 24 hours, you know? So I think that's pretty valuable. And showing them comps and data and all of those things of that nature and staying top of mind. If you have a deal, you're more likely to get the phone call answered, to get a response, to get a listing from somebody. Bringing someone deals is probably the best way to build that.
I can tell you, let's give Slade a hand, guys, for answering that question. But I can tell you guys, as an investor, right, being on the other side of that, the way you could bring me the most value is by bringing me value. How do you bring me value? You bring me data. Look, the difference between Rob, regular resi agent, right, when I talk to them, is that I can call Rob and I can be like, yo, Rob, what's happening in the market? And Rob and I can have high-level conversations. What are you seeing? What's happening with the sellers? What's happening in vacancies? By the way, he's got a report here for you guys. Rob, I don't know if you want to share this with them. He's got a report, so I could talk to Rob about. Rob can pull information from me where he provides value to me, where the information he's sharing with me allows me to make better investment decisions. Does that make sense, right, guys? So I can call Rob and be like, hey, Rob, what's happening in Monroe County with rents? Are they going sideways? Are they going up? What's happening? Are they going down? And Rob can go CoStar, pull a report, send it to me within seconds, and we can have an intelligent conversation around that. And I can have an instant conversation with Rob, like, hey, man, what do you think about this area? What are you seeing there, right? Can I execute on this plan based on this data? That's how you provide value, right? By bringing pertinent information that allows me to make better decisions and that makes me money. Because this is about making money. This is about nothing else. This is secondary about, truth of the matter is, if we're going to be honest, as investors, we have a mission, right? So my mission for my company is to provide quality housing. Yeah, right. But I also have a responsibility first to the people that lend me the money. And I always tell my contractors, it's like, hey, man, I love you, but my loyalty, I still have a level up. And I got to report to my investors. My investors, no investors, unhappy investors, know me, know you. I got to keep my investors happy. Make sense? Right? So if you're an agent, bring me value that makes me money that I could be better value to my investors. Period in the story. Let's go with Josh.
So I feel like the last gentleman asked a similar question. I'll still ask my question. So as an outsider looking in, it seems like commercial real estate versus residential is a lot harder to find leads, like buyers and sellers. So what are some creative ways that you find these leads, deals, by buyers and sellers?
Creative ways to find commercial real estate buyers and sellers. The MLS is fire, like they have great data. So I would just pull a list. It's just a list that you pull and what you go after. If you're going after residential, that's what you're going to find. You start going after commercial, that's what you're going to find. So find an agent to pull you a list off the MLS, and then you skip trace that list, start calling them, start texting them, and do anything you can to that list that is strictly commercial real estate, which would be easy to pull, just to remove the residential ones. And then you got to pay. Nobody wants to pay, so I pay a hefty amount for CoStar. That's where the big deals, all the commercial real estate is at. They're the number one commercial real estate, like Zillow, or for example. So you got to pay, and I
tried to get him to let me get access to his CoStar. He couldn't do it. So I wind up getting my own subscription, but it's expensive.
One of my recent deals, a motel deal I sold in Wind Gap. I was just driving by. I see a name. I'm like, that's a apartment-looking building. And I saw a name. I went on Facebook. I typed in Gateway Motel. I DM'd him, any interest in selling? And he's like, yeah, $500,000. I'm in India. Hit me up on WhatsApp. Free app, just driving by. So you just got to get creative.
Who's that question? So as someone who is looking to scale his business, like doing commercial real estate like yourself, what are some advice you can give on creating a team? Because I'm sure it's tons of phone calls, tons of, reaching out, doing drive-bys, like you said. Mm-hmm. So what are some tips you can give on creating a team? Like what positions go in play into scaling that business?
So commercial real estate, there's less transactions, so you don't need as big as a team as maybe you would in the residential side. But I think the first team member that I have right now that I've hired is deal flow. I'm gonna have someone who's out there 20 hours a week prospecting for deals. So that would be the first one, and then from there, transaction coordinator and things like that. But I think deal flow would be the number one.
Excellent. All right, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Is there any more questions? Give them a hand. One more question from Natasha. And then we'll take one more if you have one more after Natasha.
All right, so actually I have
Go.
3 questions here. All right. So first question is for investing. Do you do any creative financing? And the reason why I ask, because I've been listening to going to meetups, different things, not necessarily in this area. This is the first one I went to in this area, but I hear a lot of investors talking about creative ways to finance deals, especially, with people not having large, deposits and money and different things like that. So they're coming up with creative ways to also, gain access to properties and stuff like that.
Is that for me or for Rob? Okay, so creative financing. I mean, I'll tell you, I did my very first flip was a creative finance deal. A lot of residential agents, you guys are trained, unfortunately, that if it's not the traditional, you got to put 10% down, go get a mortgage. Unfortunately, you guys are wired that way. Am I right, Marcello? You guys are wired that way. That if I say, I want to do this creatively, the realtor immediately says, what's the word? That's what? That's illegal. Bullshit. That's not. That's illegal. That's the first thing that most inexperienced agents say because you're not trained. It's not even your fault. You don't know. That's illegal. You can't do that. So I'll give you an example. So I went and I got this property. I did it with a bandit sign. I put a bandit sign up, got this deal, got this guy called me. He was stressed. He wanted $22,000 for it. I didn't have $22,000. I said, I'll give you 5 and I'll give you the 14 or whatever the difference was, or the 16 when I flip the house. Here's a promissory note. He transferred the deed over to me. He didn't want nothing to do with it anymore. He just was good. So that's a way to do a creative deal. You can take over someone's mortgage, right? It depends on the strategy. You could do a sub 2. You could do a sub 2. You can do you could wrap. You could do you could wrap the mortgage, right? So there's different ways to do different things. Here's the secret to real estate. You ready? Ready? The key is take control of the asset. That's the key. Is take control of the asset. I need to take control of the asset. If I can take control of the asset with favorable terms, then I can get creative and do whatever I need to do to make some money. Give you a perfect example. So one of my students today calls me, one of my mentees. She calls me. By the way, Sabrina got her first deal locked up today. She's about to make $200,000 on the novation. She calls me. She's frantic. She's like, I don't know, Barn, I got this deal. There's a comp across 2 doors down, 435. It's $185,000. And I'm like, all right, calm down. She was like, what do I do? I was like, call the wholesaler and lock that shit up right now, and we'll worry about what the strategy is going to be later, right? We know the deal makes sense. We know the numbers make sense. It doesn't matter. If you go in there and you clean the property up and you get a dumpster, you clean it and sweep it, mop it, put some smelly goods, and you do nothing else, and you throw it on the market. You buy it for $185 and you throw it on the market for $275. It'll fly off your shelf, right? So there's different ways. She could have also locked it up, novated, right? Locked it up, novated, or do a double closing. We'll throw it on the market, do a double closing. So there's just a lot of strategies. It's basically as creative as you can get. That's basically it. The problem is that you have regular residential agents with brokers that they're all trying to protect their licenses, and I get it. I respect it. I'm not mad at you. That's why me personally as an investor, guys, respect to you guys that are realtors, me personally as an investor have not decided to get licensed. I'm not interested because I love my freedom. And I like to go out there and be creative and do things and have conversations, and I don't have to put on the realtor hat and then the investor hat, and then I got to disclose. Fuck the disclosing. I just want to have a conversation. Here's my offer. Here's what I want to do. You don't like that? I want to do this. You don't like that? I want to do this. Right? I could just have conversations with people. Make sense?
And and that's why I asked you, because I've been watching a lot, meeting a lot of different people about different creative ways to finance when it comes to investing. My issue is I don't have anybody locally. So when I saw your meetup, I said, okay, let me come, because you can keep absorbing the information, but if you don't have a community and someone at the top, right. So that's one of my issues. Number 2, I wanted to go back to the building out here, because I was actually in a meeting. I'm on a committee for government affairs.
Mm-hmm.
We had the president for the building association come out, and he actually spoke to the inventory issue that we are having out here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like what you said earlier, the cost and, you know, how everything is going up. So a lot of, he said from like 12 to 1,400 properties that used to be built per year, they're now down to about 300 to 400 because of the cost of everything going up. So they can't, if there's not a market for it, they're not going to build it. So that speaks to the short inventory that we have right now. And that's what we were in a meeting about. They were also talking about possibly making wholesalers get licensed.
Yeah, well, that's already in Philly.
Yeah.
So you guys remember, Rob, Veronica, you guys were in that meetup, I think. Mark, you were in that meetup. At one of my first meetups in Perkins, I'm going to say 2019, we had this meetup. And Chicago, the city of Chicago, Illinois. I bought an article to that meetup, and I said, hey, guys, here it is. Chicago is making wholesalers be licensed. So now in Chicago, I think, and my Chicago listeners, just bear with me. I don't know the exact, I don't remember. This is too long. But I know that if you're not a broker, you can only transact, and only brokers can transact wholesales. You got to be a broker. I think in the city of Chicago, something like that, you had to be licensed. But outside of a broker, you can only transact 2 or 3 deals. But there's ways around it, guys. I'm not going to get into it in this podcast here, but I've talked to investors of ways that I'll just say it. I could lock up a property with one entity, with this entity, right? And then sell you the entity. Hey, Louis, you want to buy this crib? No problem. I have this entity that has this property on the contract. Let me sell you this entity. Now you buy everything you buy the entity and everything it owns. Part of what it owns is this contract. Done deal. Right? So there's creative ways to do that. And I don't know if that's legal or not. So, hey, guys, listening, I don't know if it's legal. I'm just giving an idea. I'm a creative guy, and I'm in circles with a lot of real smart people, and this is a discussion that was had. So just full disclosure, okay? So, yes, to your point and to the point I was making earlier, she just confirmed it at this building thing. Builders are slowing down because the cost of money is too high. This is a money game, guys. This is a money game. This is not anything else. This is a simple money game. We just use assets, real assets, to make money. So when the cost is too high, we see a slowdown in construction. And what is that going to create what is that going to create when we already have a shortage here? More shortage, right? It's it's going to put more pressure, more demand, and it's going to more demand and more pressure on housing. And those that can solve that problem will become rich. Yes? Is that exciting? You're in this room, so you got the information. Right? Those that can solve that problem and think, hey, how can I solve that problem, can find opportunities and become rich in 3-5 years, whatever intentions you set for your life. Make sense? Any other question, Natasha?
Last question is, are you taking students still?
Yes. So we can talk about that later. So I got a couple people we can talk about. Let's give her a hand. Cello, you got a question? Marcello's coming up.
It's a 2-part question. I wanted to dive in a little more on the cost seg, like on how to, like, one, anticipate like the cost for that. Are you paying that up front? And the second part of the question was more on like collective rents in the back end. I've been having tenants that I'll go do the eviction process, win the judgment, but I don't have a forwarding address. So then I'm finding it hard to pursue actually getting the money after I win the judgment. So those are my 2 questions.
Okay, so the second question, I'll actually refer it to my PM. He's here, so he handles that stuff for us. On the first question, the cost seg. So the first question was in the cost seg, when to pursue it. I actually had this discussion with my CPA today. I was like, hey, dude, I'm about to finish this my 12 unit. And I told him, actually, I have this 11 unit I bought 2 years ago, and I want to do a cost seg because I don't want to pay next year, right? That's my next one in the bank, right? I'm thinking about what's in the bank so I can keep taking my depreciation. And he said to me, and I'm no CPA, this is the advice he gave me. He said, how much you spent? I said, I think I spent $250 in those 11 units rehabbing it. And he said to me, if you're not over $1 million cost basis, this is the language he used, and again, not a CPA, the language of money, we all have to get familiar with it. If you don't have $1 million in cost basis, it may not make sense. But if you own a bunch of little stuff, if your stuff is smaller, again, you might want to talk to a CPA. But more important, I want you to talk to a cost seg company. I could give you the one I use. So we spend $8,000 for one building, and then we spend like another $7,000 for another building. So we spend like $15,000, but it's 57 units in 2 different locations, right around the corner from each other. So that was the cost. So that's a write-off for me and my investors. So we write that off, and then I got $500,000 in credits, right? So that's a win. Like, that's a win. Like, man, you breathe right when you got that kind of credits, and you know you got that in the bank. You sleep good at night. You know, I know now that, hey, man, I have $500,000. I could go kill it. I could go flip and kill it with my flips, and I could sleep good at night. You know what I mean? I could go kill it. So this is why I'm a big firm believer of having a rental portfolio, right? Having that passive because of the depreciation, the tax write-off. Like, that's honestly, in my whole career, this is the first year that, you know, you hear things like Donald Trump doesn't pay taxes. Remember that whole fiasco, right? He doesn't pay taxes. Well, guys, he doesn't pay taxes legally. Duh, this is what he does, right? He got big-ass building, got cost seg study. Legally, the government says it's okay to do this. And then he writes it off and it's legal. So this is my first year actually doing it, and it feels good, man. It feels good.
You have to continue for the 10 years?
So
Can you pause it? Like, how does that work?
What do you mean continue for 10 years?
Like, it's like 27 and a half years, you can squeeze it to 10 years.
Yeah. So the general rule that what my CPA just told me, he was like, don't do a cost seg if you're going to sell it in a couple of years. Because there's something so if you're going to sell it in a couple of years, you recapture it. But you can recapture it at a higher tax rate. So there's some things to it. You recapture your depreciation at like an earned or something, not a CPA, but like an earned income cap rate when you sell it. So now I'm recapturing that. So now I'm going to pay a higher tax than I would have paid. But this asset we're holding, this thing is making us money right now. This thing is just a machine making us money. We got a great manager. It's just doing good for us right now. So, you know, we're waiting for the rates to come down. And when the rates come down, then I'm talking to Rob. I'm like, Rob, give me $8 million for this thing and call it a night. All right. So it depends. So to answer your question, it depends. Make sure you understand what your tax and what your strategy is. Like, hey, man, do you feel confident you're going to hold this? So I'll give you an example. So the 12 unit, right, and that we're redeveloping right now, that one I talked to my CPA about. He said, definitely we want to do a cost seg. We want to do it now because it's empty. Everything's new. We want to do it now. You're over $1 million in that project. So we're going to go ahead and do a cost seg immediately after we're done with the construction in June. We're going to take all of our credits. But here's the second part to this, guys. Ready? Who loves real estate? Come on. I'm going to get excited when I think about this one. So it's in an opportunity zone. Opportunity zone says if I hold it for 10 years and I sell it, no capital gains taxes. Woo! If I do and this is me and my creative thinking. I'm not a CPA, so CPAs, I'm going to run this by my CPA, but this is me and my genius mind here, right? If I go and do a cost seg, and I say I get $250,000 in credits, and I hold it, and then I sell it in 10, and then I got no capital gains, baby, that's a good deal. And I cash flowed it for 10 years. And I cash flow every year for 10 years. Is that good or good, guys? Come on. That excites me. Right? And there's deals like that for all of us out there. You just got to know the information. You just got to get out there and do it. Go ahead, brother. You had another question?
Yeah, then the second one, I guess, is to the property manager.
I wrote a lot of notes because, collection, bad debt, we call it bad debt, right? So, I mean, how many of you got bad tenants that don't pay, right? So we've always said, collection is either favorable if it's collected, it's unfavorable if it's not collected, right? So how do we collect that money? Number one, you should have a good rapport with your tenants, right? Because I've had, we say in this business, bad things happen to good people all the time, right? You fall, the moratorium, the CARES Act, right? All the stuff that happened during COVID, we were helping getting people government funding so they wouldn't, lose their housing, even though we couldn't act on the writ of possession. So what is the writ of possession? When someone doesn't pay rent, you go to the magistrate, right? In instead of Pennsylvania, you can, represent yourself, or a management company can represent you. And what you need to do is file for non-payment of rent. You have a court date, you have a hearing, you go to court. Now, if you're looking to get possession of that property, you have to go to court to file for eviction. However, it could be a pay and stay, or it can be a pay and you want them out, right? So when you go in front of the judge is going to ask you, do you want this to be a pay and stay? And you say yes or no. If it's a bad tenant, they don't have a rapport with you, they never pay their rent, they're always late, they always have stories, maybe it's just time to say, hey, how about I don't take you to court? I have a month and a half security. How about you get out in 30 days and we make a payment plan? And if as long as you abide by the payment plan, I won't go after you for collections. You have an application on them, so you have their social security, you have their license, you have a contract, you have a lease agreement. You have all the balls in your court. Like, it is in your court. But if you want to be the good cop, bad cop, I always have a good rapport with my tenants. I say, listen, I understand you lost your job. You know, you're behind a month's rent right now in collections. We have a month and a half in security. How about you let me advertise the property for rent? You let me show the property, because ultimately what you're going to do is get a new tenant in there, right, to list, to rent the property. Hopefully you get a little more market rate. But you also want to hopefully have a good rapport with that tenant, because you don't always want to kick a person out. I always tell people, in 28 years I've been doing this. I started in this business in 1995. We didn't have smartphones. We had yellow pages. We had newspaper ads. We had the apartment guide books. Remember those big apartment books you can find housing? And I always tell people, I see I see my mom in this business. I see a single mom struggling with kids to put food on the table, keep a roof over your head. So we know bad things happen, but if it's a bad tenant, what's a bad tenant? They don't communicate with you. They don't pay their rent. They don't care. Take me to court, evict me. Okay, we'll do that. So there's a couple of things you can do. One, you can try to do a payment plan, out of court. If you have to go to court, obviously go through as much as you can through the whole process. I also recommend, I have a one-page sheet in my office hanging on my wall. It's all the government-funded programs. So I go to the single mom and I say, here's a list of all the companies you can call and all the government funding programs you can call. They have free money for people like you that are facing eviction. Try to get the free money. Sometimes they'll pay up to 6 months rent. I had one lady fall behind. They paid 4 months of her rent. She got 4 months ahead of rent. I said, now start paying your rent every month. You'll never fall behind, right? That's what you need to do. You got to talk to your tenants. If you have a bad tenant, go through the process. Possession, if you're looking to get possession, on my lease protects me, protects my investors, my landlords. My lease stipulates I can terminate at any time with 30-day notice. You could move in today and 30 days from now say, hey, listen, the landlord decided to sell the house. Here's a 30-day notice. We have to terminate. Unfortunately, he sold the house. He wants to sell it. Maybe I'll help you find. So come in as a good cop, help them find alternative housing. If you have other friends, investors, property management companies, I have inventory. I have friends that I can call. Hey, do you have a place? I have a lady. I just sold their house and they need to move. I'm looking for another place. Non-renewal. You don't always have to go through the eviction process. If you have that tenant coming up, their anniversary's coming up, non-renew them. The ball's in your court. You can just say, here's a non-renewal notice. You don't have to have a legal reason why you don't have to non-renew someone. You literally can just say, this is a non-renewal notice. I'm not renewing your lease, unfortunately. You have to get out at the end of your lease term. And then if that doesn't work, 30-day collections. There's collection agencies everywhere, right? You want a credit report, how many lenders are here? You're looking to get a mortgage, you got to get those collection accounts off of your credit. You go through a collection agency, you have that application, you have the social security number for that client who you just evicted and you're trying to get that money. Report them to a collection agency. It's not going to be favorable income today, but rest assured, if they owe you 2-3 months rent, when they do try to apply for that mortgage 3 years from now, that's going to come up on their credit report. Guess who's going to get money 3 years from now for that tenant you evicted 3 years ago? You're going to get it. Yeah, they're going to give you a bid. Sometimes 50-50, 70-30, whatever you agree. Depends on how many accounts you have. Yeah, it'd be nice to get a paycheck 3 years from now, right? And then also, in some jurisdictions, if you have their employment, you can take that judgment to the court, the magistrate, record it on the judgment, on the monetary judgment, and they can garnish their checks if you have their employment. So I've only did that one time, and it didn't work because he quit that job and went somewhere else. But I can tell you, there's no running. That's always going to be on their account. You can't run from your credit score. You can't run from your collection accounts. So there's a lot of ways you can do. But I would always go through that. Be the good guy. Go to them. Say, I know you fell behind. Let's get a payment plan. You're behind 2 months. I have a month and a half in security. How about you get out in 30 days? I'll give you a 30-day, 45-day payment plan. So I don't have to go through the eviction process for you. If you stay with that payment plan, I won't do anything. That's the best way if you have a good relationship. But if it's a bad tenant, you want to get them out, go through the eviction process and go all hands on deck.
Never try to get it yourself. You said you go to the collection agency. Never try to get it yourself. You go to the collection.
No, I always try to collect it myself for sure. Yeah, absolutely. If it's a good tenant, like I've had, some situation with a good tenant and they're like, listen, I'm starting my new job in 2 weeks. I lost my job, so I fell behind a month and a half or two. So keep my deposit. I'll either play spotless. I'm going to put a lockbox in the key. And I'm going to give a 24-hour notice. I'm going to start showing that property in hopes of pre-leasing it. Because remember, the idea is to get it occupied again with a good paying tenant, qualified candidate, and then let them exit, do a payment plan if you have to. And then it kind of works. You don't have to go to court. There's no filing fees. There's no eviction, all that stuff.
Very cool. Thank you. Let's give Melo and Marcello a hand. Thank you.